Cities are a history of decisions. They are the habitats we build for ourselves. But when you look closely at American infrastructure, things start to look a bit strange. Take Chicago, Illinois. It is a massive, booming Midwestern metropolis. On paper, it looks like the template for every other U.S. city. It has a dense downtown core. It has an endless grid of streets stretching into the distance. It has massive highways cutting through the landscape. But beneath the surface, Chicago is actually the opposite of almost every major city in America. To understand why, we have to understand the invisible patterns of urban form. Urban form is simply the physical shape of a city. It is the street layout. It is the building pattern. It tells the story of how a place grew over centuries. Most American cities grew in a very specific fragmented way. They started as tiny trading outposts or railroad junctions. Then they exploded outward. They became giant urban areas made of hundreds of smaller independent towns. Look at Los Angeles, California. LA is a massive continuous urban sprawl. It is made of over 80 independent municipalities. Each town has its own mayor and its own local zoning laws. You can cross a street and suddenly the buildings change height. It feels chaotic, decentralized, and completely fragmented. Or look at Houston, Texas. Houston is a giant patchwork of absolute architectural flexibility. It covers 640 square miles. It is the only major American city with no zoning laws. A luxury tower can sit directly next to a warehouse or a car lot. It is a city built entirely around the automobile. It has some of the widest highways in the world, like the Katy Freeway. Growth there just pushes outward across the flat prairie forever. New York City is another beast altogether. It is a hyper-dense vertical island. In New York, density is packed into a massive central core. The Skyscraper's tower over Manhattan. But as you move further from the center, that density tapers off. It turns into traditional low-density suburbs. It relies on a magical underground subway to move millions of people. So where does Chicago fit into this landscape? Chicago is unique because it combines absolute planning order with brutal industrial logic. In 1820, Chicago was just a quiet riverbank with a few cabins. It was a simple meeting place at the edge of open land. But its geography positioned it perfectly between the East Coast and the interior. By the 1850s, the railroads arrived. Tracks started radiating outward like spokes on a giant iron wheel. The city grew faster than anyone could plan. People arrived by the thousands, building a dense patchwork of wooden neighborhoods. Then, in 1871, catastrophe struck. The Great Chicago Fire broke out near the O'Leary barn. Strong winds pushed the flames from rooftop to rooftop. The fire jumped streets and even crossed the Chicago River. In less than 12 hours, the entire core was reduced to ruins. Piles of broken brick and hollow building shells were all that remained. It was an unbelievable disaster. But for Chicago, this destruction became the ultimate planning opportunity. Most cities grow organically, step by step, over centuries. Planners have to fight against historic property lines and narrow colonial streets. Chicago suddenly had a completely blank canvas. City leaders didn't just want to rebuild. They wanted to make a bold statement to the entire world. They turned to a legendary architect named Daniel Burnham. Burnham believed that cities should be grand, organized, and beautiful. His famous motto was to make no little plans. In 1909, he released the official plan of Chicago. This wasn't just a basic street map. It was a complete radical transformation of the urban landscape. Burnham looked at the messy, smoky industrial shoreline and chose to reclaim it. He declared that the lakefront belonged to the citizens, not the factories. He designed a continuous network of grand green parks along the water. He carved out wide, monumental boulevards inspired by the symmetry of Paris. He created a perfectly unified civic heart for the metropolis. At the exact same time, Chicago became a laboratory for architecture. Because land downtown was limited, architects had to build upward. They invented the modern skyscraper right here in the Loop. They abandoned the messy, chaotic styles of the Victorian era. They embraced clean lines, logic, and structural engineering. But they didn't just build cold concrete boxes. They utilized the principles of classical and neoclassical design. They added symmetry, grand columns, and triangular pediments to their towers. This architectural form wasn't just for decoration. It was a brilliant psychological trick. By making a bank or a civic hall look like an ancient Roman temple, they signaled absolute permanence. It acted as a stabilizing anchor in a fast-changing modern world. This intentional design is what separates Chicago from its peers. In Los Angeles, the city is fractured into dozens of competing municipalities. In Houston, the lack of zoning creates visual and structural chaos. In New York, the density is bottlenecked on a single crowded island. but Chicago operates with absolute regional clarity. Its downtown loop remains the undeniable geographic heart of the entire region. The grand public parks still shield the shoreline from heavy industrial blight. The massive alleys behind the streets keep the sidewalks clean and walkable. It is a city designed around a single massive idea. It proves that urban spaces do not have to be accidental nightmares. They are the direct result of human choices and long-term vision. Chicago took the trauma of total destruction and turned it into paradise. It is a monument to what happens when you make no little plans.